My name's Randy Picht. I'm the executive director here, and I'm very happy to be able to introduce Connie Farrow, whose fellowship has been on trying to figure out how to help newspapers digitize their content and monetize it as well, which is probably even more important these days. Maybe comes as a surprise to folks that not all newspapers digitize their content, and part of what, or a big chunk of what Connie's been doing is trying to figure out what the most efficient way to do that, and also what happens if we get all the content digitized. So,
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming to my brown bag. As you heard, my name is Connie Pharaoh, and I am project manager for American Newspaper Digital Access Corporation. That's a mouthful, so I use the acronym ANDAC. And I'm also doing research on behalf of ANDAC as part of my fellowship here at RJI. And what I want to talk with you about today is how ANDAC is creating exciting opportunities for America's newspapers. I'm going to walk you through a series of about 12 slides, and that'll explain to you ANDAC and what we are and what our vision is and what I've been doing as part of my fellowship here at RJI. And then I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. So let's get started. ANDAC was formed in 2010. It came about because a group of publishers were lamenting the impact of the internet and the digital age on the newspaper industry. There's no question that technology is changing the way everyone is doing business these days. And this is especially true for newspapers, which have faced assaults on multiple fronts. Among the things that we're seeing is a massive unauthorized use of our content by online news aggregators who are benefiting from it without paying to use or to publish it. We've also seen third-party vendors capture news content and resell it as archival material for their own profit. And of course, as many of you may have heard, there have been legislative threats across the country, including right here in Missouri, by government officials who want to remove legal notices from our public newspapers, or from our newspapers, and put them instead on government-controlled websites. So these publishers decided that it was time to take control of their industry and to leverage the power of working together to harness the value of their content before it's diluted on the internet. And so the publishers asked their press associations in Missouri, Kansas, and Iowa for help. A task force was formed, and a plan was created that seeks to help newspapers turn the challenges that were being created by the industry or by the internet into opportunities and to create new revenue streams for newspapers. And thus ANDAC was born. ANDAC is a for-profit stock corporation owned by, governed by, and focused on the newspaper industry. As you can see, our management team consists of seasoned newspaper industry executives with diverse backgrounds and experience from Missouri, Kansas, and Iowa. Our president is Andy Waters, who's general manager of the Daily Tribune here in Columbia. Our vice president is Steve Fisher of Woodward Communications out of Dubuque, Iowa. And our secretary-treasurer is Chris Mudge, who's executive director of the Iowa Newspaper Association. Our directors also include Doug Cruz, who's executive director of the Missouri Missouri Press Association, right down the street here in Columbia, as well as Doug Onstadt of the Kansas Press Association. Our board also includes individuals from McClatchy and Gannett newspaper chains, as well as Lawyers Weekly, and then a variety of publishers from papers both small and large from across Missouri, Kansas, and Iowa. By being owned by the press associations and individuals from the newspaper industry, ANDAC serves as a trusted source that can ensure content will only be used for its intended purposes. It also has the institutional knowledge and understanding of the complexities of the industry that is essential to returning a value to our newspapers. So, what is ANDAC's vision? Well, simply put, we seek to help newspapers of all sizes use technology to their advantage and to not be threatened by it. We believe that by working together we can leverage our power for a common goal that will help our industry continue to thrive and to continue to produce the quality journalism that is the cornerstone of our democracy. In short, ANDAC's vision is to aggregate newspaper content of all types, that being news, features, sports, as well as classified, display, and legal notice advertising. To gather this content from newspapers both large and small from across the United States, to digitize it and put it into a central database, and then create new products based on that content, thereby returning value to our newspapers. So how do we get there? Well, newspapers are already familiar with the process of sharing their content through their press associations. In addition, most are already using PDFs as part of their publishing process. So our plan is to work with a third-party vendor to convert the news content in a timely fashion from a PDF into a standard XML format that will make it easy to categorize and quickly repurpose the data for packaging and resell. By collecting, aggregating, and distributing the content with minimal human intervention, we believe that we can keep our labor costs low and our return to our newspaper members high. So I created a slide that just basically shows how we envision the workflow going. So the newspapers will upload PDF files of all of their news pages as soon as they're finished publishing to an FTP server that the vendor will operate. The next step is that the vendor will go through pre-analysis where they'll check to make sure that all the papers from that day have been received, that all the pages are in good quality and able to be processed and sequenced and all of that. And then the next step is that they'll convert the PDFs from PDF to an XML standard. We plan to use what's called NIFT XML schema, and that stands for News Industry Text Format. And it's a XML specification designed to standardize the content and structure of the individual news articles. And it's used by the Library of Congress as well as a number of other countries around the world that have embarked on similar endeavors. So it will allow us to also, one of the advantages is that it will allow us to embed a link into the metadata back to the original PDF file. And in talking with potential end users across the country, we found that that was one of the things that they wanted. In addition to having the digitized text, they wanted to be able to see what the story or the ad looked like on the page. So we'll have the PDF there for them. And then the next step is that the vendor will validate all the XML output files and make sure that everything's structured the way it should be, all the metadata is correct, and just basically quality check the integrity of the product. And then it will go out to our clients. You know, when I first started my fellowship, I had a number of people tell me, be sure to make a calendar and you know, watch your time because this 8 months is going to go really fast. And I actually thought I had an advantage because I had begun working in June on my project, and in fact we had a potential vendor lined up by mid-July. So when I arrived at RJI in September, I felt that I was a few steps ahead of the game anyway. And we had actually been working with this vendor. We had provided PDFs from the Columbia Daily Tribune. They had presented us with some sample outputs. And in fact, we'd even reached the point that we were talking about fees and how we might make this a profitable venture. But in the process of doing all this, I also noticed that while they had sent us many samples, they had not sent me any samples of the display, classified, or public notice advertising. And this was important to me because my original focus of my fellowship was narrowly focused on one sliver of that content, that being the public notice ads. And we thought that if we could create a website and work with the public, with the legal notices, that would translate into other areas. So without the public notices, I essentially had no project. And I started to panic, and I called the vendor who was in India and started emailing and asking about the advertising content. And at 3:03 on Friday, October 5th, I received a simple email that just said, "These items are not possible." So I'm like, what? I went home and I was bummed out, thinking, oh, what am I going to do? And I tried to call, and over the weekend I didn't get any feedback from the vendor. And so I learned shortly thereafter that the vendor had actually left the company that I had been working with. So my project was up in the air, and I was a mess. And but I decided we'll figure this out. And I just came back to RJI on Monday and started trying to figure out what's the problem. And so, unfortunately, the vendor didn't tell me why he was unable to convert the files that we needed. So my background actually is as a working journalist. I spent 22 years in the newspaper industry. A good portion of that was as a correspondent for the Associated Press. And then the last 8 years, I've owned my own public relations firm. So my knowledge of HTML is limited to one 8-hour continuing education course. So I was at an extreme disadvantage from the beginning, but we knew that, and we just kind of worked through it. So I did what all good journalists do. I just started asking questions and trying to find anyone who would give me a few minutes of their time. And that was everyone from Roger Fiddler, Mike McKinney, and even Justin Giles. And Justin actually is very calm. If you know, he's downstairs in technology, and he just said, "Let's just Google it, and we'll start from there." So I did what we do. We put in XML to PDF, and I got 586 million. It showed up that 586 million people had actually put in that same search within 17 seconds. So we knew there were a lot of people looking at this issue and wanting information on it, but it still didn't, even those searches didn't tell me what the problem was. And so my next step was just to start calling people and sending out emails. And it was kind of funny because I must have made, I don't even know, 50 to 100 calls and emails. And nearly every conversation or email was met with the same immediate responses. Yes, that's a problem. And so I'm like, well, do you know what the answer is? No, we don't. So, and just, you know, it's kind of funny because this guy, Tasca, of Tasca Digital, they're out of Canada, you know, I explained my background to him and my limited vocabulary on the subject, and so he sent me a nice email back that just said, to manage your expectations, entire companies are built around solving this problem, which I thought was kind of humorous. So he obviously knew I was in over my head. So, but I just kept working, and eventually I came across a white paper, and it explained what the problem was. And in a nutshell, it's just, the issue is that it's very difficult to extract document text from a PDF. And so if you think back to the slide where I was talking about what the process that we want to use, we want papers to upload a PDF of their news pages and then extract that content or reverse engineer it back into an XML format. The fundamental problem, as you know from looking at news pages, they have multiple columns and multiple fonts and all kinds of interesting things that keep us intrigued. And when we're looking at a page, there are photographs and illustrations and icons and all of that. And not only that, news stories rarely hold to one page, so you'll have one or more jumps. And that's a problem when they're trying to structure this data, because the computer has to know where to get all of the content to put it into one file. And if that's not bad enough, just the simple structure elements of the news page or news process also creates problems. When you think about when it's going through the conversion process, it can split words that weren't meant to be split. You'll see hyphens at the end of stories sometimes, or sentences that are not typically used, words that are typically hyphenated, so the machine doesn't know that. So it just, it basically becomes kind of a jumble. And So the issues can be overcome, but the problem is that it takes a lot of human intervention. You have to have someone actually looking at the PDFs and the XMLs and quality checking them, and that drives up the cost. So, but as luck would have it, I actually have identified a vendor that is able to do the work according to our specifications. You know, the interesting thing is that they're able to do all of the content, the news, features, sports, as well as the classified display and legal notice advertising. But as a part of this whole process and trying to figure out how to salvage my project in the event that the legal notices fell through, we actually came to realize that we didn't need to limit ourselves to the legal notices, that there probably is a bigger demand and greater market for all of the content. And that we didn't need to limit ourselves in that way. So that was exciting. So let's talk about some of those opportunities. We envision ANDAC being a B2B, a business-to-business venture. The vendor anticipates that he will be able to turn around this content anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. And this gives us a significant advantage over some of our competitors because, as we all know, in today's world, people want things 20 seconds ago. So ANDAC does have competitors that already exist in the marketplace. We believe, however, that we can provide, using this technology, better, faster, and more efficient product because we are the newspaper industry. And so we have buy-in. And having an aggregated database of digital content creates a lot of potential marketing opportunities. Among them are opportunities such as archival material to libraries and universities. There are a number of businesses now that are using news content even as part of their branding and marketing. If you look at Pepsi's landing page now, their homepage is all about pop culture and the top Latino albums for 2013 and actress and fashion and all of this. So brands are starting to use more content as part of their marketing and branding strategies. In addition, we have more companies and political campaigns and advocacy organizations that are doing e-newsletters, and they're using news stories to enrich that content and to increase their open rates. Another opportunity that we see is digital tear sheeting. If you're not familiar with the advertising process, many press associations, just as one example, operate advertising operations so that if you're a political campaign and you want to have an ad appear in papers all across the state, you can simply go to your press association and make the buy there. The problem is that in order for papers to get paid, they have to return a tear sheet as proof of publication to the client so that the money process can take place. And right now there's a bottleneck in the industry because they're using snail mail for the most part to rip these tear sheets out, mail them to the press association. The press association gathers them and then mails them to the client. So we think that by using our PDF and our XML technology that we'll be able to cut labor costs and speed that process along. And of course the technology also creates the opportunity, should we decide to move forward with the public notice, a unified public notice website that was the original focus of my fellowship. The one thing that we are not interested in is working with a content aggregator such as a Yahoo or a similar entity that wants to offer public access to our content in any way that would compete with our newspapers in their local market. So that's a non-starter for us. So what's next? Well, this semester I'm working with a group of 3 MBA students who are part of Professor Randy Smith's business journalism class. Their Sherpa is Professor Mike Jenner, who has extensive knowledge and a deep passion for community newspapers, so it's been a really great fit. We've asked the students to look at 2 business models. The first would have ANDAC operate as a content wholesaler that would simply aggregate and structure the content into a digital database for delivery to a third-party vendor who would then license, market, and distribute the content to end users. So that's one area that we've asked them to look at. The second is just simply having ANDAC do everything, not only aggregate and structure the content, but also take care of that identifying the end users and marketing the content to them. And I think the board is probably most interested in the latter, and it seems to see the most exciting opportunities there. But we're looking forward to our students giving us their final recommendation and presentation, and that will occur on Friday, April 26th here at RJI. My group's up first at 9 a.m., so if you're available, we'd love to see you, and I think it'll be really exciting. They've been a great group of students to work with. As for me, in addition to working with the students, I've also been trying to identify ways to get buy-in from our newspapers, because ANDAC doesn't work without strong participation from newspapers across the country. And so I've been looking at ways to entice participation. One of the things that we've been exploring is allowing newspapers to have access through a digital or some kind of portal where they would be able to access their digital content. And we think this will be of value and of interest to newspapers because as part of the industry cutbacks, many papers have had to either cut back on library staffing or let their librarians go. So we can perform that service for our newspaper members. I've also been traveling around and doing quite a bit of talking about ANDAC and trying to generate interest. I spoke to the Associated Press Publishers meeting in December, attended the Iowa newspaper a conference in February. I've also attended the Inland Press Association meeting. I was featured in an article in Editor and Publisher in March. And then, of course, Jennifer has been a great help, and the rest of the communication team here at RJI in terms of letting the world know about what I'm up to. And the stories that Jennifer have written have been published in a number of papers as well as Press Association newsletters. So that's been great. And I actually have had quite a few calls back to me from publishers who want to know more, as well as vendors who are interested in learning more about this process and how they might jump in and help us aggregate the content. So the response so far has been positive. So in closing, I guess I want to say that yes, there have been some challenges that have been created by the internet and the digital world, but we see also opportunities. Demand is greater than ever for news. What newspapers haven't figured out, frankly, is how to take advantage of the market outside of their own communities. They do that very well, but they haven't been able to really expand beyond that. And that's really what ANDAC is all about, is helping newspapers work together to find a solution that will help them continue to thrive and to be an important part of the local communities. It's exciting stuff. It's taking a product that still has tremendous value and finding new uses for it. So my fellowship ends in April, and I suspect that ANDAC will continue on, and we hope to someday be able to be out there in the marketplace with all the other companies. So that's my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. We have a microphone that we'll pass around so that it can be part of so that you can be part of the show. Good. Oh, I knew I could count on Randy.
So, in terms of getting the newspapers to buy in, can you have you thought about what your strategy might be and what the value points that you will try to describe to them to improve the buy-in process?
Yeah, no, in terms of the idea is that through the press associations, papers are required to contribute news, and so we feel like that gives us an advantage, and that was one of the reasons why when ANDAC was coming up with its original structure, it worked through the press associations. But we do have a lot of work to do in terms of, that's not an automatic, they contribute their news content, but that doesn't mean we can market it to different entities. And some of these newspapers already have agreements in place. So for instance, Andy Waters, the Columbia Daily Tribune, he already has contracts in place with a couple of different suppliers of news, and he's been working to get out of those, but he didn't realize one of them had a renewable clause on it, so it'll be another 2 years before you can get out of that agreement. So that is an issue that we've been working on, and we've been trying to find out, find incentives. The price point, I just don't know at this point. We spent so much time looking at the technology that now we're looking at the price point. And I've done some research with Cision and ProQuest and Newsbank and some of those, and it looks like we can come up with, if we can come up with a price point that is competitive with what's already out there, that we can turn some of those companies to our, to ANDAC, and we also offer that opportunity to have the PDF element, which we think will be of interest to some of those PR firms and corporations. So I guess those are good questions and things that we need to continue to explore.
And how would you characterize the expectations from the industry regarding the sale of its content to, beyond the readers and online readers and print readers? Are they looking to make $100 million, or are they okay with 25 cents?
It's funny, when I was at Inland Press, I sat next to the publishers from the Hutch News in Kansas, and I was giving him my sales pitch and pouring it on, and he listened very politely, and at the end of the conversation, he just shook his head and said, "I'm so tired of people telling me how valuable my content is." And so I was kind of a little bit taken back, and I understand where he's coming from. If you think about newspapers traditionally, they have been focused on ad revenue. The newsrooms are the cost side of the equation, and so they've really focused on advertising. And now that that revenue is being diluted, now all of a sudden they're interested in finding out what is happening with their content. And frankly, I worked in the industry for 22 years, and I had no idea how much PR people make finding content and getting it to corporations. And I'll just give you one example. Last summer, I had a client call me. There was an issue with a wastewater treatment plant in Warrenton, Missouri. And they felt that the story they saw, their interaction with the reporter was good. They saw a story online, that was positive. But they still wanted to see that hard newspaper to know what the headline said, if there was a photograph, if there were any pull-out quotes, and all of that. So this was a weekly newspaper. So my hourly rate for corporations was $200, so they paid me to drive to Warrenton, Missouri, wait for the paper to come out, pick it up, call them, read the story to them, verify the headline and all the photographs, take a picture of it with my iPhone, email it, go back to my office, keyboard the thing in. Then I took 2 copies to FedEx and sent one to Chicago and overnighted one to Atlanta. So I made $800 that day. Federal Express made $78, and the newspaper made $1. So they had no idea. And when I tell people that, they're like, "Really?" I had no idea. So companies are buying content. If you think about it, there's a Walmart in nearly every community across our country. And it's not just Walmart interested in Walmart and the brand, but they're interested in land use issues, they're interested in employment issues. I mean, there's a variety of topics. It's not just a single issue for them, and they're paying PR people a lot of money to gather this content. And the one thing that I have found in just my little slice of the world is that it's very difficult to get content in a timely fashion and get it back to the client. And so that's really what we want to do, is that you can get, if you're a Wall Street Journal or a New York Times, that's great. But now so many businesses care about what's in local papers, that's the content that's difficult to get. And so that's why, you know, one of the things that we've really focused on with getting community newspapers to the table. So does that help? Okay. All right, well, I appreciate everyone coming today. Thank you very much, and I'll be up here for a few minutes if you have any questions that you didn't want to ask publicly. I appreciate it. Thank you.